Hello and welcome back to this new video of mine. This is gonna be a rant and I'm ready. You know, I wanna chat about a few books that were not up to my expectations because they were hyped beforehand and I thought they would just exceed my expectations in the positive. However, they exceeded my expectations in the negative. I wanna make sure upfront that you know that everything I say in this video is not directed to the author. I'm not trying to offend anyone. Also not if this is one of your favorite books. I'm not attacking you personally, it's just my personal opinion. I'm trying to be very considerate about my word choice here because I tried like a year ago to film this video already and I noticed that I was a bit too much on a rant and I don't think that's actually fair. A year older and wiser, I want to take it a bit differently this time as an approach. I want to say it as a critique video instead of just saying things just to be engaging. This is not going to be a video where I'm going to be bashing anyone. That's not my intention. Like, if it comes across like that, I'm severely sorry. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But that was just my disclaimer and now we can get into this video. Oh, and also welcome to day 11 of BOOKMAS. Wow, we're almost finished. That's crazy. The time flew by actually. It's insane. We're almost having Christmas. I can't believe that actually. But yeah, okay. So the first series I actually want to talk about. This is not just one special book. It's an entire series because for me the Twisted series did not live up to the hype. I made an entire video on that one, so if you want to see that, I'm gonna link it somewhere here. The writing style fell a bit flat. Like, it felt like, especially Twisted Love was the beginning. Like, you could feel that it was the first one in a series. But it just didn't convey the emotions I wanted to. And for me personally, I just, in the moment when I was reading it, I just wanted something more in depth. I wanted a more genuine connection because I was then more used to reading books like The 7 Year Slip or Emily Henry, and of course these are completely different, and now I'm also reading a bit more dark romance. Even with dark romance, I feel like sometimes characters have a bit more detailed description, and I feel like especially Alex and also, what was her name? See, I forgot her name already. Like, that's the issue. Like, for me they just fell a bit flat. Basically all of Anna Huang's men, besides The Striker, I believe, that she just published, are billionaires or millionaires. They're extremely rich. And in all 4 books of the Twisted series, I was feeling like I was reading about the exact same man in every single book. And for me personally, I was trying to read them back to back to back. That wasn't my cup of tea. I feel like I was more in the mood for like an emotional romance or maybe also fun romance. The one I loved most, however, was Twisted Hate. But still, Twisted Hate had like that one scene that also everyone is talking about that kind of like killed the vibe. For me, I wasn't a big Josh fan from that point onwards anymore. I loved our main character in Twisted Hate, but besides that, I was just not having it. And then Twisted Lies was also fun, but I feel like it was just way too long for what it was. They all have a fun twist to them. Definitely, they are engaging, and I think I can see why people say they love them if they just started to get into reading. But as someone who's been reading for years already, for me it was nothing groundbreaking. For me it was not something new, and it wasn't something that I would be picking up again. Like, I'm not really thinking about these characters 24/7. I didn't build up a connection to them, and I think that's the biggest issue for me. So with that one, I actually don't know where the hype is coming from. Maybe it's the entire premise, and like the characters are so intertwined, but for me the men are just not giving what they're supposed to give. I'm just a bit disappointed in that one, to be honest. I had really high hopes, especially in Twisted Games, and it all just fell a little bit flat, as I said, because of the writing style and because I couldn't connect to the characters. Then the next one is Guild. I picked this one up like 2 years ago, and I wasn't a lot on BookTok or anything, but I was really interested in the premise of this one because it's about like the tale of the man that when he touches something or someone, it turns into gold. And she was her prisoner or something. I don't really remember everything. I just remember that like I was already in a reading slump and I tried to get out of it with that book. It just didn't work. Trying to get out of one, like getting out of the reading slump, and it put me back into it, you know? That was really not a good one because I also started to skip to the end of the book because I was just so bored at one point. The end, I gotta say, picked up in pace. That was more interesting, but the first 2/3 were really dragged out and slow, and I know it's an entire series. I'm just confused in which direction it's going because I know there's some love aspect happening there and I feel like I know where this is going. I don't know, it's just not hitting for me. And also I thought this was considered young adult, which I was completely wrong about. Like, this is not a young adult fantasy. This was really graphic in the way it was described. So if you're one of my younger audience members, this is not a book for you, I would say. Like, definitely 17 or 18 plus, I would say, because this was just... I was surprised as to how graphic this was sometimes. It's not like something was actually happening. Like there wasn't a lot of stuff happening, but it was just the language was really adult. I don't know, I feel like maybe it's getting better in the future. I want to at one point continue the series, but I was just severely disappointed because I felt like it had such good potential. Like the entire premise of it was so good, but we ended up just staying at the same point for way too long, like in the same scenery, and then really nothing was happening. It's like, what is going on here? Like, what am I reading about? But it was just not for me. A book that I heard a lot of stuff about, like back in the days, like 2 or 3 years ago, and that I completely erased from my memory already because it was actually really, really bad. And that's, as I said, just my personal preference, my personal opinion, but Funny You Should Ask was not a book for me. So she was interviewing him and they had a past before, so I think she was like a journalist or something, and he's a rock star, pop star, and I usually love these books. I eat this shit up, you know, like if it's done well, top tier. Give me a good rock star book, you know? No, he was a famous actor or something. He was famous, that's all I know, and that was what intrigued me. But to be honest, that was another book that I tried to read to get out of my reading slump back then. Didn't help either. I think I read 2/3 of it and then I DNF'd, and then I read the end and I was like, yeah, okay, now I know what happened, so I can quit basically. It was really not for me. I don't know, it was just so flat. The characters felt flat. The story was really dragged out. Like there were a few plot points that I was like, okay, that's interesting, but I didn't feel like any depth to the characters. I didn't feel a connection to them, and it was just all so flushed out, you know? It was so basic. And I was like, well, I know where this is gonna go. Like, I know you're gonna end up together, so why are we making such a problem out of stuff? Basically, this entire book is erased from my memory. Like, it's really hard for me right now to gather information back again, like to remember the feelings I had when reading it, because I just completely forgot about it. Yeah, I'm really disappointed in that, because I had that one on my wish list for a very long time, and then I was like, back then I didn't buy as many books as I do now, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna spoil myself and I'm gonna buy a book and try to read again. It was a bit disappointing, and then sadly enough, I thought reading is not for me anymore. The reading slump took on even longer. As I said, just not for me. It was not my cup of tea. But let me know in the comments if any of these books I'm talking about today were actually one of your favorites. And if so, please tell me why. I'm open to giving them another shot, and also just to hear your opinion, because I feel like it's just interesting to talk about them. So this is not a one-sided conversation. I want to make it a two-way conversation. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of them. The next one, to stay like in the fantasy realm with Gilded, we have From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Very, very sad to say that, because Jennifer L. Armentrout used to be one of my absolute favorite authors when I was younger. Like her Lux series and her, what was it, Dark Elements, and also all her like Wait For You and like the entire romance books that she wrote. So cute. Loved them. But by now her stories just don't hit for me. At least From Blood and Ash didn't. Like, it had a lot of potential, I feel like. In the beginning I really enjoyed, but then it was just like, I didn't like our male character. And the first one was completely fine, but I have actually the second one still here, Flash and Fire, and I also have the third one here because I was really ambitious. But like, I think I even finished this or almost finished this. I'm this far in. This is literally, like, I got 550 pages in and then I stopped again. It's over 700 pages. Like, this book is a brick. This book is so heavy. It's just disappointing. I don't know why. Like, I mean, it's romantic fantasy and I thought I would love this. But like, as I said, the first one was fine, but then it just went downhill because there was just so much like storytelling around it and still nothing was happening. Like, I was literally reading for 200 pages about the same stuff. Can we get to the point here? That wasn't engaging for me. I feel like in her Lux and Dark Elements series, maybe because she kept them shorter, way different energy, way different vibe. They were just way more to the point and way more concise. Maybe this is because this is a bit more adult fantasy instead of young adult or new adult. This is more new adult, but still, I didn't feel it. Then another book I DNF'd was Girl Abroad by Elle Kennedy. I'm gonna be upfront here, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that book by her yet, but Elle Kennedy is everywhere a household name at this point. I feel like if you've not read The Deal, you've read The Dixon Rule or something, you know? You probably have heard of hers before. I read The Deal like ages ago, so that was fine. I enjoyed it back then, I think. But Girl Abroad was just a train wreck. I couldn't continue this, and I still remember vividly why I couldn't, because it was just this year. The writing was completely fine. The banter was fine, but she had a love triangle in there, and one man in particular fell completely flat for me. Like, as a character, he had no personality. It was the sport dude, I'm just gonna say it right away. Like, maybe I'm just not into sports guys, that could also be. He was just not having like a flushed out character, and basically he was treating our main character like shit all the time, and I just didn't agree with that. And then making it a love triangle and her obsessing over him just didn't feel completely right by my book, you know, by my book, in my opinion. Yeah, and then I skipped to the ending and I saw how it's gonna end, and I was like, I'm not gonna continue this. I mean, if I already skipped to the end, that means I usually hate the book. Like, not hate, okay, I don't hate anything, but like, it means I usually don't like the book. So that was not for me, which was really disappointing because I was really excited about that one actually. This was her first one that's playing in London instead of the US, hence why Girl Abroad. But really interesting premise. I was just so curious, but it sort of fell flat. I don't know. Now I think a little bit of a rant needs to start. This made me upset. I watched The Summer I Turned Pretty and then I listened to the audiobooks. And please, can someone tell me what a train wreck this was? Like, can some... Okay, I'm trying to be respectful here because I have a lot of respect for Jenny Han and all her work, because I mean, like, what she's doing and what she's putting out is amazing on screen, and I think for younger audiences beautiful. Like, we're just gonna leave the first book aside because the first book was completely fine by me. The thing was just that I was comparing it to the series because I watched the series before. That was my fault, right? Like, I was feeling like I could predict everything because I watched the series beforehand, and that's my fault. But the first book was completely fine and good. The issue I'm having with the series is the third one. I'm not gonna spoil it here, but just the actions that were portrayed were very immature, and they tried to sell it as a very mature thing they're doing. And I understand that if you're at that age, you think everything you're doing is so mature and you're like an adult, so you can make those choices. But the choice that was being made was not reasonable, and it was not supported by anyone. So I didn't feel like it was actually something that they would go through with. It didn't feel like the characters. It felt so out of place. It made me actually angry, and I was like, what am I listening to right now? And the issue I'm having with this is also that like younger girls of 13 or 14 years old are reading this, because that's her target audience, I guess, that they are reading this and they don't have the capacity to reflect, because I didn't have it back then. They don't have the capacity to reflect what's going on there, and that maybe the choices that are being made are not good and are maybe not reasonable. And it felt very fast-paced in a sense that like decisions were just being thrown over, and it made characters that I didn't mind before highly unlikable. It was not a good solution to the entire series, I feel like. I think that's like a very big issue that I'm having with this, and I'm curious how the series is gonna play this out. Also, the ultimate ending of it felt completely out of nowhere. I didn't know where it was coming from. I saw the build-up before in the first two books, but like for me, we didn't see it. That is something that made me a bit upset, to say the least. As I said, like, I just feel like it was not a good portrayal of the entire situation. The author could have gone around this, and there was such a big drama made out of this through the entire book. If you read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It was just unnecessary. It was not a necessary plot point, and it was dragged out way too long, in my opinion. That's why I rated the series in general way lower. So actually, that was one of my worst reads of the year. So we have two more to go. Another one is also a series, also one that has been actually picked up by Amazon as well and turned into a series, which is Maxton Hall. So I read the German books by Mona Kasten, the Maxton Hall series, Save Me, Save You, Save Us. So I read Save Me years ago and I didn't remember anything. So that was interesting because I watched the series and I was like, I remember you going to London, but the rest was all gone, erased out of my memory. That was really interesting actually to see, because back then I already didn't really care for the Save Me book apparently. And then I thought, okay, I watched the first season now, so I'm just gonna go into Save You, and I started reading it like 100 pages and I couldn't. I just simply couldn't. So I started to listen to it on Spotify, and that was a good decision because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to go through this series at all, because the writing style was just very basic. Nothing is being described, like the surroundings are not being described. It's just not poetic, you know, it's just very flat out, straight out, a lot of dialogue, but it just doesn't feel like the characters are real, you know? So like for me personally, even the side characters felt like they had more character development and everything than the others. For me, it was really just the writing style, because I felt like I was reading a book for teenagers or younger, whereas Mona Kasten has a few explicit scenes usually in her books, and I would say her books are more towards new adult. So it didn't feel like I was reading a book for someone who's above 20. I didn't have to use my mind as much, you know, and maybe that's also fine. And I know a lot of people that actually love her books, and as I said, it's just personal preference. I think you're gonna fly through her books, but for me personally, it felt like there was not a lot of stuff happening, and the writing style was just really, really flat. I think this, though, gonna be completely honest, I can see how this is used as a screenplay. Same with The Summer I Turned Pretty, because the writing style is also very similar in that case. I can see how this can be used as a screenplay, because basically you don't need to change much, because there's so much dialogue. Like, you have brief scenery descriptions, but you don't get like a lot of inner monologue, or if you do, then it's just very surface level, so that you can understand as an actor maybe how the character is feeling. It's very interesting. So it is kind of like a movie playing in your head, but I like if there's something more to it. Like, I need a bit more, I want to annotate things, I want to see beautiful phrases on the page and think, wow, this is art. And that just disappointed me a little. The last one that I also made a reading vlog about is Iron Flame. Do we even still need to talk about this? I feel like everyone at this point was disappointed in Iron Flame, or at least most people. Let's just put it that way. I feel like Fourth Wing was a very good book, especially if you're getting into fantasy. For me, it was one of the few books that got me out of a reading slump again. Like, it was back then when I was reading Powerless, Fourth Wing, and I was reading another one, Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. So Powerless and Fourth Wing got me out of my reading slump, which helped me to fall back in love with romantasy, which is why it just holds a special place in my heart. And I feel like she has a lot of good cliffhangers and like a very good like storytelling technique. I feel like that's a very good aspect. However, Iron Flame felt a bit dragged out sometimes, had the exact same storytelling line as Fourth Wing, which then made it feel a bit repetitive. And also it was just towards the half of the book, I was like, do I want to continue? I'm not really invested anymore. And that was really sad, because I used to really love Violet and Zane, but also the dynamic and the conflict that was being created didn't feel necessary to me. It's being dragged out way too long. Unnecessary, just to create some tension between all the characters that didn't feel like it was needed, you know? Like, some communication would have done them well. And overall, the only thing that really got me was the ending. Like, I hope they're gonna find a solution for this, because otherwise I'm gonna be completely upset. But besides the ending, the book didn't really hook me, and that was just a really big disappointment. And also just the plot holes and everything. I really have hopes that the third one in the series is gonna get better now, because that comes out in January, which is not a very long time anymore. Also, let me know if you want to have a reading vlog on that one, by the way, because I mean, I could do that. Did one for Iron Flame, so I could also do that for Onyx Storm. But I'm afraid, to be fair. I'm really scared of how this is gonna go, and I don't know if I'm gonna continue the series if this one is not gonna hit properly. Sorry that this wasn't such a positive video. I hope you could gather some valuable information out of this one regardless, and maybe you agreed with me, maybe you disagreed. As always, let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I love each and every one of you. And almost Merry Christmas. Insane. Just insane. Have a beautiful and blissful day, and I'm gonna see you tomorrow for the last day of Bookmas. Bye!